For over 2,000 years, countless narratives have sought to unravel the mysteries of how our world operates and, more importantly, why it is the way it is. Yet, few tales have captivated humanity's imagination as profoundly as the mysterious and controversial story of the Third Temple of Jerusalem. Will this fabled temple, cloaked in prophecy and surrounded by controversy, finally be rebuilt? Which leader wielding unparalleled authority would dare to undertake such a monumental task that could alter the course of history? What will become of the Jews and Muslims in this complex interplay of power and faith? Are we on the brink of witnessing an unexpected alliance between these two ancient religions, or will this be the catalyst for a new conflict? And perhaps most intriguingly, what does the Bible reveal about this puzzle that has sparked endless debates and theories throughout the centuries? Prepare yourself, dear listener, to explore the profound mysteries and prophecies surrounding the rebuilding of the Third Temple, a subject that promises to challenge everything you thought you knew. Before we proceed, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so YouTube can alert you whenever we release a new video. Let's begin. The temple holds immense significance within the Jewish tradition, serving as the heart of worship and the spiritual life of the people of Israel. This sacred site is believed to be the dwelling place of the divine presence, where essential rituals and sacrifices are performed according to the Jewish faith. Moreover, the temple embodies the unique bond between God and Israel, representing the covenant that binds them together. The construction of the temple not only provides a physical location for worship, but also stands as a symbol of unity and community among the Israelites. Throughout history, the destruction of the temple and the anticipation of its rebuilding have been pivotal elements in Jewish identity and liturgy, symbolizing moments of hope and redemption. The temple is far more than just a structure. It is the epicenter of Jewish spirituality and a testament to God's enduring covenant with His people. The Third Temple holds a significant place in biblical prophecy, particularly concerning end-time events. Since the Second Temple's destruction in 70 AD, Jewish tradition has maintained an enduring hope for the restoration of this sacred sanctuary. To grasp the importance of the Third Temple, one must first consider the history and significance of the first two temples in Jewish tradition. The first temple, known as Solomon's Temple, was constructed around 957 BC in Jerusalem. For nearly 400 years, this temple served as the primary place of Jewish worship until it was destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar in 587 to 586 BC. Marking the start of the Babylonian exile, a time of great sorrow and longing for the Jewish people, who yearned to return to their land and rebuild their sacred space. After 70 years in exile, the Jewish people returned and rebuilt the temple on the same site, as documented in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. During King Herod's reign, the temple area was further expanded. This was the temple that Jesus encountered during his earthly ministry. The early church in Jerusalem also frequented this temple, often utilizing its courtyards for Christian worship until persecution by the Jewish authorities in Jerusalem began. In 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the temple once again, leaving only the western wall, now known as the Wailing Wall, a place where Jews still gather to offer their prayers. This event was monumental, leaving the Jewish people without a central place of worship and marking the beginning of a long period of dispersion and yearning for the temple's restoration, a longing that continues to echo through Jewish tradition and identity to this day. The Temple Mount, the historic site of the first two temples, remains one of the most hotly contested locations in the world today. It is currently home to the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, two of Islam's holiest sites. The Dome of the Rock, constructed between 688 and 691 AD by the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik, stands on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where it is believed the Holy of Holies from Solomon's Temple once stood. This site holds deep religious significance for both Muslims and Jews. According to Islamic tradition, it is from here that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the Isra and Mi'raj. Meanwhile, Jews revere it as the place where Abraham was prepared to sacrifice his son Isaac. Any Jewish attempt to rebuild the temple in this area is fraught with controversy, as the destruction or alteration of the Dome of the Rock would be seen as a severe provocation and could potentially ignite major conflict. Dear listeners, the complexities surrounding this land are immense. The presence of Islamic structures and the administration of the mount by the Islamic Waqf create formidable barriers to constructing the Third Temple. Any move to change the status quo could lead to widespread conflict. The challenges to building the Third Temple are not only religious but also deeply political. Territorial disputes have long fueled the conflict between Israel and Palestine, with the sovereignty of Jerusalem, particularly the Temple Mount, being a central issue. Known as Haram al-Sharif in Islam, this sacred site has been at the heart of numerous political and religious tensions. Under international law, East Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is located, is considered occupied territory by Israel since the Six-Day War in 1967. Religious sensitivities and international agreements, such as UN Security Council Resolution 142, which calls for Israel's withdrawal from occupied territories, further complicate the matter. Any attempt by Israel to build a temple on this site could trigger not only local unrest, but also regional and international crises, threatening the fragile peace in the region. The role of the Israeli government. While there are factions within the Israeli government and religious groups that advocate for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, most Israeli political leaders understand the immense complexity and grave consequences that such an action could entail. The reconstruction of the temple on the Temple Mount, a site revered by Muslims, could spark an international crisis and provoke armed conflict with neighboring Arab nations. The Israeli government is acutely aware that any attempt to rebuild the temple would not only have significant local repercussions but could also destabilize the entire Middle East. Relations with Arab countries, already strained, could deteriorate rapidly, potentially putting existing peace agreements, such as those with Egypt and Jordan, at risk. Furthermore, the international community, including key allies like the United States and the European Union, would likely oppose such a move due to the far-reaching geopolitical consequences. For these reasons, Israeli political leaders often refrain from taking actions that might escalate the conflict, choosing instead to maintain the status quo in an effort to preserve regional stability and avoid a war that could have devastating consequences. Now, who does Jerusalem truly belong to according to the Bible? From a biblical standpoint, Jerusalem is portrayed as a city belonging to the Jewish people. Here's an analysis based on the scriptures. Jerusalem and God's covenant with Israel. Jerusalem holds a central place in the Bible as the city chosen by God for his people, Israel. It was King David who conquered the city from the Jebusites and established it as the capital of the kingdom of Israel. Let's examine the passage from 2 Samuel 5:6-9. Then the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites who lived in the land. They said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here," but David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. And on that day, David declared, "Whoever strikes down the Jebusites, let him reach them through the water shaft to attack those who are lame and blind, those whom David despises." As a result, it became a saying, "The blind and the lame shall not enter the house." So David took residence in the fortress and named it the City of David. He then built all around it, from the Millo inward. Jerusalem thus became the capital of David's kingdom. It was a strategic choice for several reasons. First, it had no prior affiliation with any of the tribes, making it an ideal location for a unified Israel. Secondly, the city's natural defenses made it easier to protect against enemy forces. Later, David's son Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem, further solidifying the city as the spiritual heart of the Jewish people. God also made a covenant with David, promising that his descendants would reign eternally in Jerusalem. This covenant underscores the belief that Jerusalem is a divine inheritance granted to the Jewish people. Prophecies about Jerusalem, biblical prophecies also depict Jerusalem as a city destined to be the center of God's kingdom on earth. In Zechariah 8:3, the Lord declares, "I have returned to Zion and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain." This passage, along with others, reinforces the view that Jerusalem is where God will establish his kingdom and restore his people. The significance of the Temple Mount located in Jerusalem, holds special importance as it is the site of the temple, the core of Jewish worship. According to the Bible, this is the place God chose for his name to dwell. As Deuteronomy 12:5 says, "But you shall seek the place that the Lord your God will choose out of all your tribes to put his name and make his habitation there. There you shall go." In this verse, God directs the people of Israel to seek out the place he has chosen to establish his name. This site is crucial for worship and sacrifice, symbolizing the future temple in Jerusalem where the Israelites would gather to worship and offer sacrifices. Jerusalem and the promise of the eternal kingdom. The Old Testament is rich with promises concerning the restoration of Jerusalem and its pivotal role in God's future kingdom. Let's read Isaiah 2:2-3. "In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established at the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.'" This prophecy refers to the millennial reign of Christ, a future era in which God's promises to his people will be realized. During this period, Christ will reign on earth, bringing peace and justice and restoring what has been broken. The prophecies concerning Jerusalem and temple worship will come to full fruition, reflecting God's faithfulness to his promises and the fulfillment of his divine plan for humanity. Rabbinic perspectives, interpretations, and prophecies. The concept of the Third Temple is a subject of significant debate among rabbis, with views ranging from cautious patience to calls for immediate action. Traditional Orthodox rabbis. Many Orthodox rabbis believe that the Third Temple will only be built when the Messiah comes. They hold that any human effort to construct it before this divine event would be inappropriate and possibly against God's will. The Temple Movement, this group, represented by organizations like the Temple Institute, asserts that it is their duty to prepare all necessary elements for the reconstruction of the Temple in Jerusalem. Their efforts include creating sacred items such as the menorah and the altar of incense, and training priests to perform their functions in worship. They have dedicated significant effort to recreating many of the objects used in the Second Temple, using methods and materials that align with biblical descriptions. Additionally, they have adopted a holistic approach that involves not only the physical restoration of these sacred objects, but also the spiritual preparation of priests. Their dedication to being ready for construction at any moment underscores their firm belief that the temple must be rebuilt and its worship restored, reaffirming the significance of this sacred place in the life of the Jewish people. Contemporary views. Some more liberal rabbis propose that the Third Temple might not be a physical structure, but rather a spiritual state of connection with God. Others interpret the current situation as a test of faith, with the right moment for action still to come. What does Bible prophecy say about the Third Temple amid current tensions? According to Bible prophecy, a Third Temple will be established in the end times, closely associated with the figure of the Antichrist. The Jews are prophesied to welcome the Antichrist, mistakenly accepting him as the Messiah, as he will facilitate temple worship and temporarily ease tensions with the Muslim community. This event is crucial because Muslims also anticipate the arrival of the Mahdi, a messianic figure expected to emerge in times of great turmoil. In this scenario, the Mahdi and the Antichrist could be seen as the same figure, leading to a complex and potentially volatile situation. The Antichrist will succeed in brokering a peace treaty between Jews and Muslims, paving the way for the construction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. However, after the temple is built, the Antichrist will desecrate this sacred site, triggering a period of intense suffering and chaos across the world. Let's read Daniel 9:27. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. In the middle of the week, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. When the times of the Gentiles come to an end, the final week of prophecy will be fulfilled. This last week, as we just read, is divided into 2 parts. In the middle of the week, the coming prince will put an end to sacrifice and offering. Let's explore what must happen in each of these parts. The text indicates that at the start of this final week, the coming prince will confirm a covenant with many. Some translations suggest that he will either enforce or impose this covenant. Regardless of whether it is achieved through diplomacy or force, the result will be that Israel will once again live in safety and peace, allowing them to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. Today, this seems nearly impossible to imagine. The site where the Jewish temple once stood is now occupied by the Dome of the Rock, one of the holiest places in Islam. The idea that the Jews could reclaim this sacred site from the Muslims seems unthinkable. Let's consider that there are currently about 1.5 billion Muslims worldwide, compared to approximately 14 million Jews scattered across the globe. Under these circumstances, it is challenging to envision how the coming prince will manage to persuade the Muslim community to relinquish the site currently occupied by the Dome of the Rock, allowing their adversaries to build a temple there. However, it appears that this prince will indeed confirm a covenant with many, suggesting that he will engage not only with Jews and Muslims, but also with many other nations. When the temple is later rebuilt, the prophecy of the abomination of desolation, as foretold by Daniel and Jesus Christ, will come to pass. Let's read Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So, what is this abomination of desolation, or in other words, this grievous sacrilege? The prophet Daniel described 2 instances of such abominations. The first was committed by Antiochus Epiphanes, a Syrian ruler who attacked and desecrated Jerusalem. In his book, chapter 11, verse 31, Daniel wrote, "Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate." History confirms that Antiochus Epiphanes ravaged Jerusalem in 170 BC, during which over 100,000 Jews were killed. He halted the daily sacrifices in the temple, offered pig's blood on the altar, and erected a statue of Zeus in the holy place for worship. However, when Jesus mentioned the abomination of desolation, he seemed to be pointing toward a future event of even greater significance. Some scholars suggest that this prophecy saw partial fulfillment in 70 AD, when the Roman general Titus invaded Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. Yet, the apostles Paul and John interpreted this prophecy as pointing to a future event when the Antichrist will place an image in the temple during a period of great tribulation. Let's read to Thessalonians 2:4. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. According to these interpretations, Christ's words extend beyond the events of 70 AD, anticipating even greater catastrophes that will precede his second coming. In Revelation 11, 1-2, we also read, "I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, 'Go and measure the temple of God and the altar with its worshippers.'" But exclude the outer court, do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months. Considering that the book of Revelation was written around 90 AD and the Jerusalem temple was destroyed in 70 AD, we must assume that the temple John saw in his vision, which he was instructed to measure, refers to a future temple. To measure something implies taking possession of it. Measuring the temple and altar symbolizes the idea that what is sacred and dedicated to God is protected. In this vision, it indicates that the temple and altar are in a spiritual safety zone, playing a crucial role in the divine plan. Thank you for watching Daily Logos, we inspiring faith and impacting change.